Welcome to the panel on Breakthrough Innovations in Digital Health, Cracking the Human Code. I'm very happy to introduce my panelists as follows. First, ladies first, Ekaterina Berezzi, co-founder and CEO of ExoAtlet. Please come on up. Hyunjun Park, CEO and co-founder at Catalog. Mark Davies, VP Biomedical Informatics at Benevolent AI. Todd Huffman, CEO at 3Scan. And last but not least, Alex Levy, co-founder and COO at Atomwise. So welcome everyone. So maybe let me frame the question a little bit before we start. Healthcare, or health generally, has gone through some seismic changes in the last 10 years, mainly due to digitalization and tech. And all of you probably participated in some form of it. Robotics, AI, amazing data storage. So maybe I could just go through, starting from you, Alex, asking you what your company does and why is it a breakthrough innovation?
Okay. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Alexander Levy from Atomwise. Atomwise is a company that's applying artificial intelligence to drug discovery. So particularly, we're using a technology called deep learning neural networks. This is the same kind of AI that's in Google's self-driving cars. It's in Siri and the iPhone. And we were the first team to apply this to reason about chemistry and structural biology. And the idea to think of is the way you design an aircraft in a computer or a building in a computer, and we use that to predict its properties before we make it. What if you could do the same thing for chemical compounds that could treat diseases? And so we screen about 1 million new compounds a day against various diseases. We've worked on about 27 in the last 2 years. And the reason technologies like this, I think, can be thought of as a breakthrough is their ability to conduct massive scale research at extremely high speeds, but also very low cost. And that could transform how biomedical research is done, which is increasingly taking longer and becoming more expensive. This may be the countervailing technology.
Okay. I understand you also have a program called Artificial Intelligence Molecular Systems program, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched a program just a couple weeks ago now, which is going to put this technology in the hands of up to 100 university labs. So far we've worked with about 20 universities, and now we're opening it up to a much larger field. The offer essentially is that they describe to us in structural terms the disease that they're trying to go after and the mechanisms involved. Then what we're going to do is predict a series of compounds that we think could be medically relevant to what they're doing. And actually, we're going to go ahead and put those compounds on a microtiter plate, which we're going to mail to them. And so at their lab, they're going to open the box, take the plate out, and the plate is all ready to go into the forms of testing that they use later on. Okay. Those compounds are going to be free for them. And so in essence, this is allowing each of these universities to search through tens of millions of compounds, which is something that they could never afford to do on their own, which we'll do for them gratis.
Okay, thanks for that. Todd, CEO of 3Scan. Computational pathology. What is it, and how is it a breakthrough innovation?
Yeah, so 3Scan is a computational pathology company in that we help understand and cure diseases by using robotics and mathematics to look at the tissue scale structures of diseases like cancer and understand why the diseases are happening, or if someone's trying to cure them, to help our partners and customers understand when they're actually making progress towards curing a complex disease.
I was at your booth yesterday, and you're showing me how it worked. And I really like your analogy of the movie. Maybe you can also share that a little bit with the audience.
So in conventional pathology, the work is all done manually, and human hands are slow and expensive. And so from a functional perspective, you only have time to actually look at maybe like 6 sections. Our robots are each about 1,000 times as fast as a human, and they can run 24 hours a day. And so where a human can do 350 sections in a day, each of our robots can do about 20,000. So we can do complete scans through the tissue. And one analogy for non-biologists to understand why this is important, the manual way, since you can only look at a few sections, it's like trying to understand the plot of a movie by looking at a dozen randomly selected stills. And you can do that if you have a really good imagination, or in the pathology case, if you have 10 years of training to become a pathologist. what we're doing in being able to do more complete scans is we can actually build more complete 3D models of the disease structures, and it's done in a fully digital way, which allows us to use quantitative analysis and statistics to make the decisions instead of having to rely on the imagination of a human.
So my first two panelists are talking about massive amounts of data and robotics. Mark, I think you're also AI in drug development. Maybe you can talk a little bit about benevolent AI.
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Mark Davies. I work at Benevolent AI. We're a technology company using AI to essentially enable and speed up scientific discovery. We're currently applying the methods, platforms we're putting together in the field of drug discovery. And this is where we're seeing a lot of really positive results at the moment. So a bit of the structure of the company itself, it's set up like essentially like a small pharma company. And I think of the slide which Daniel, the CIO from Bayer, presented earlier today, where he was describing, I guess, the key attributes and assets that are needed, to actually leverage a lot of the technology and advancement that's going on at this moment. Literally within the last 2 or 3 years' time, these techniques have been coming online. And we've already sort of put in place a lot of these components. So we have an AI team developing algorithms, extracting information, and most importantly, a drug discovery team that is acting and generating hypotheses off the back of this work. And we're seeing, as I say, big successes in this at the moment, is running clinical trials and a number of hypotheses which are sort of outsourcing at the moment. So it's a really interesting area for us.
So with all this massive amount of data that the AIs are ingesting and linking together, maybe I'd also ask Hyunjun Park about how this huge amount of data is stored. I mean, there's an explosion of digital information throughout the world, and I believe that Catalog has an innovative way of storing this data.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. My name is Hyunjun Park. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Catalog. So we store digital information in DNA molecules. And so the idea of storing information in DNA has been around for several decades now. And as soon as DNA was discovered, it's been pretty obvious that it's got huge advantages in storing information because nature has had billions of years of evolution to perfect it, to optimize it for the storage of the nature's most important information, our genetic information. But the problem has been the cost of DNA synthesis to be able to synthesize enough DNA to store the information that we want to encode into these molecules. And our company has developed a new way of using prefabricated DNA and using combinatorial sets of them so that we can dramatically cut down on the cost of DNA information storage.
Maybe I can ask you a low-tech question, because
Sure.
I'm not a techie person. So you put if your information is in the DNA, how do you retrieve it? I mean, in my head, I guess it's not like a flash drive where you can plug it in somewhere and suck the information out again. So how would that work? And where would you put the DNA?
Sure. DNA information storage is it's a very physical molecular storage of the information. So when you encode it, it's in a homogeneous solution of the molecules that you've picked from this prefabricated molecules that we generated. And for storage, we dry it down, lyophilize it to a small pellet at the bottom of a tube. So anybody that's ordered DNA from different vendors will know that it comes, when you order from companies, it'll come in a white powder, white to colorless powder in the bottom of a tube. And it's very stable at that state because it's away from water molecules that could hydrolyze it, and any contaminating enzymes would lose activity when it's dried down in that state. So that's how we would store it. To retrieve the information, we would rehydrate it, just adding water to it, and we would put it on a sequencer to read back the sequences of the molecules. And that would tell us which molecules are present, and we can translate that back into the message that we encoded.
That's amazing. Ekaterina, robotics for rehabilitation. I think ExoAltet helps people with lower limb injury and paralysis to really have a new lease of life. So maybe you could share a little bit of what your company does.
Hello, everybody. So I'm co-founder and CEO of Exathlete. It's the exoskeleton for rehabilitation, exactly. So we developed it for last 3 years. We started 3 years ago, and now we have the product that is already certified and can provide and speed up the rehabilitation process for people after injuries or strokes, or even for kids with the cerebral palsy. So we just imagine it's about 9 million people all over the world who are the disabled people. And for them, the rehabilitation process must start in the hospital for sure, but continue at home or maybe in any special rehabilitation centers that they can visit every day, like we visit the physical training centers, for example. And in this case, the digital health, I mean the problem of collecting data and monitoring the process of rehabilitation for these people, it's very important question, and it's very important problem for the medical doctors, because when person starts using the exoskeleton, this person starts walking again and the rehabilitation process starts. But it needs maybe months or years to help persons to walk again by himself. And in this case, their therapy must be changed every time when the person reach any kind of goals. I mean, that's when the person starts feeling better himself. And we need to know everything about his conditions while he is walking in the exoskeleton. So we developed their web platform that provides data from the exoskeleton to the medical doctor who monitor this patient. And in this case, the medical doctor can do it from any point of the world, and the person can use it at home at any physical training center, even in their gym. So gyms can set up some exoskeletons and provide this kind of service for rehabilitation. So it means that it's a new market. It's completely new market for their gym owners, something like that.
Thank you. So if I listen to all of you, I think one common theme is breakthrough innovation, but another one is data. And maybe I could ask the gentlemen, two gentlemen who are looking at AI, about the data that they are processing or using to get the results that you are achieving. How do you ensure that the data quality is good? And how do you get access to all the data that you need? I mean, there are obviously data that's regulated or private. How do you make sure that what you're churning through in terms of your AI is actually the data that's relevant? Mark?
Yeah, maybe I'll come in first. So it's a big part of all of the, I guess, the technologies being used here. So it's a data-driven technology at the moment. And one of the things which, I mean, we put in place here at Benevolent is utilizing a number of domain experts in the particular field. So getting in people a bit like myself, but also in my team, we have a number of informaticians, biomedical domain experts that are identifying the core data sets that are required, analyzing this information, and processing it. The other technical component as well is just the amount of data that is being generated. So we run a lot of information extraction from the free text, and every 30 seconds or so a new publication is being generated, and how you can access, process this data and get into the systems. And the key thing really in terms of ensuring that we're generating good quality data is the feedback from the end users using our systems. So again, we benefit from having an internal team that can analyze the data, provide immediate feedback, and when there's something that's not quite correct, we can adjust this and figure out what is the source of that issue, potentially remove that data set from our systems, or make the necessary standard modifications, normalizations that need to be allowing us then to actually maximize that data set's power within our system. So that's, it's a feedback loop essentially.
Okay. Alex, any other thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I want to provide some credit to Mark, because one of the databases that we use, he was heavily involved in developing, in fact. So that's a very cool thing. So we've been the beneficiary of that. In the case of Atomwise, I think in a lot of similar ways to Benevolent, we look to a series of public sources. So there are a great and growing number of databases that are curated of various kinds of information relevant to those of us doing drug discovery. And a lot of that information is unstructured, as Mark mentioned as well. Another common problem that all of us face in the realm of these large data sets is the noise in the data. And so I'll give you one example. A lot of times we're looking at values that have been transcribed by hand into something, right? So let's say that the critical value is it's a measurement of 100. Now, afterwards, you write a unit of measurement. And we've seen sometimes that we can have, for the exact same thing, two measurements that are 10,000 times apart, but the exact same numerical value. Why is that? Well, it's because somebody sat at the keyboard, and when they were transcribing it, somebody wrote 100 NM, and then somebody else wrote 100 MM, right? And they just hit the wrong key on the keyboard. And so if you look at that, you'll see a distribution where you see the exact same numerical value, hugely far apart, and you'll see these two peaks, right? And naively, you could say, okay, the right thing to do here is, how about we clean up the data? We'll just take the average of all the values, okay? And now the average of the value is in this bizarre no man's land between these two incredibly distant values. So I mentioned that to illustrate that one of the big challenges that we collectively face is distinguishing what real data is from data that is due to some type of error, be that experimental error, transcription error, or some error in our interpretive process. So that's one of the constant battles that companies like ours fight.
Yeah, actually, Bayer did a study I find very influential in our thinking. Bayer took about 100 of the most influential preclinical studies and reproduced them from start to finish, and found that only about 25% of the studies were reproducible, which is really bad. And there are a number of things that feed into that. Some of it's human error, and other parts are decisions that are made that are black boxes where you can't really see into it. And so one of the things that we're doing at 3Scan is, one, we're building robots that make it a lot cheaper to collect this type of data, but we also instrument every step of the process in a way that's very auditable, so that if things come out funny, that we can drill back down and figure out, well, what is it that went wrong? Where in the conventional manual pathology process, all the decision making happens in the mind of a human, and the analog to digital conversion goes through fingertips onto a keyboard. And everything that went into that, and any errors that happened in the A to D, you basically have no insight to. And so one of the things that we really believe is that in order to do good bioinformatics and good computation in biology, you have to have data sources that are consistent and audible, so you can go back historically. And just maybe to tie in with the DNA storage, there's a lot of value to keeping information in the biomedical space. There are groups that go back and look at statistics from very old studies that were very influential. There's a paper I was reading recently looking at some of the early studies in nutrition, and they actually had to go, they found some archives in the basement of a grandson of the scientist, digitized them, reanalyzed it, and found errors. And we can't keep doing that. We need to store data for basically in perpetuity. And that's one of the reasons I'm excited about the DNA storage. At 3Scan, we're building a new lab. We're about halfway done. By the end, it will be generated. By December, we'll be generating a petabyte of data per day, which creates a real challenge in how do you store and process and think about quality data.
Has the ability to store data, the expansion of the ability to store data, really helped your own innovation then?
Yeah, I've been working on this technology for about 12 years, and when we started, we basically realized that it was infeasible for us to do the work, and the big problem was the price of storage. But if you look at the cost of storage, they're pretty consistently dropping. So I actually stopped working on this for about 5 years to let the storage costs catch up, and then restarted it once the price of storage got to a feasible level.
Maybe we switch topics a little bit. I mean, we talked a little bit about breakthrough innovation, and all of you sound as if you're breakthrough or beyond. How do you see that your company or your innovation can really transform healthcare as an industry? Do you see that as a true possibility or not? Maybe I start with Ekaterina, if you don't mind.
So the transformation of their industry is very easy with the exoskeleton. Just imagine before the exoskeleton appeared in the market, there were no possibility to work for the people who is disabled. It's very easy. They were only the big machines like Lokomat from Hokoma that cost enormous, and they are only, for example, in Russia we have only 40 centers where they have been, and in Europe there are something the same. So it means that for people they need to walk every day, maybe an hour, but they need it for everyday rehabilitation. And now they can do it. So the exoskeleton is cheaper and more mobility solution for just walking anywhere you want. So just along the aisle, any aisle. It can be even at home or in a hospital or in a gym, anywhere. So it means that any kind of rehabilitation facility can use it for rehabilitation to provide this kind of services. And it means that a lot of people who must stay at home because they did not have any kind of special physical training, effective procedures, now they can use it. And for us it's very important to combine data about how they improve their ability of walking, because some of them can walk by themselves even in some months. And we need to improve the methods, and we need to have the data of how different medical doctors use this kind of rehabilitation equipment and provide it for a lot of people, just because all of us, when we are okay in the same way, but when we have some problems, it's completely different for each of us. And it means that we need a lot of different methods how to rehabilitate people, and it's a good idea to collect data and provide it to their medical doctors who'd like to make investigations in this area.
Can I ask a question? Maybe it's a really dumb question. Does the patient control the exoskeleton, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, it depends on the ability of the patient. So if the patient can do movements by his legs but can't walk, it means that he controls. But if he doesn't have any kind of movement, so we have the programmed pattern of walking, and he can just the remote control in the crutch, and he uses crutches to keep vertically himself. And the exoskeleton walks, it's like the motorcycle looks like. I mean that you just drive it. So that's why. But we have their myostimulation also, and it means that we provide signals to the muscles, and the muscles start working according to the walking process. So, and it means that we really speed up the rehabilitation process. And this kind of service we provide through the web platform to the medical doctors, so they can control it, the using of it with the patient in any kind of facilities, the rehabilitation facilities.
Anybody else with innovation that's going to transform the healthcare industry?
I think one of the strongest trends in biology, if not all of technology, is the cost of DNA sequencing dropping really quickly. We're already living in a $1,000 genome world, and Illumina just announced earlier this year that pretty soon they'll be able to sequence an entire human genome for under $100 in under an hour. So with that, I'm pretty sure everybody is going to get their genome sequenced. It'll be a routine physical exam. So with that, I think comes a lot of interesting ethical questions and problems to address. Where would you trust to have that data stored? Just about every single IT company that you can name has been hacked at least once. Maybe not you guys yet. But so there are privacy concerns, and it's not just about your own privacy. It's when you get your genome sequenced, it's the information of all of your relatives and your children for perpetuity. So I think when you need a very strong, secured way of storing massive amounts of data, DNA could be a way to store that information. So it's, I see the irony in that we're taking information out of one form of DNA and then putting it into another form of DNA. But it would be in a much more highly readable form, and it would be readily accessible, and something that, with the data density of DNA, something you could carry around with you on the person. So I think that's a very interesting possibility that we're looking at as a company.
So privacy is also very important, but there is also in value having data be accessible. My genomic data is actually published open on the web, and I was inspired by a friend of mine who was a cancer researcher who died of cancer. And as he was dying, he published all of his tests and everything that's happening to him to the web in real time. And the title on the top was "My health is more important than my privacy." And I'm not saying that everyone's genome should be published openly to the web, but something that we care about deeply at 3Scan is making data accessible. And so one of the things that we do on the commercial side is we actually offer steep discounts for our customers who are willing to allow us to publish the data from the study with open data licenses. And we think that's important because that allows other researchers to build on top of that. And open source software and communities like Wikipedia have contributed immense amounts of knowledge to the world. And actually one of the inspirations for that was in my early career as a bioinformatician of looking at the data from microarrays and looking at the power of doing large-scale meta-analysis across lots of studies. And so I think that companies like Atomwise and Benevolent, they also really benefit from openly accessible data in our industry.
Yeah, and also one thing to know about Todd is he's a very active Wikipedia reader. If you're cruising, looking at some sort of social media website, and he looks like he's doing the same, he's actually like 4 links deep on Wikipedia. I've seen him do it sometimes. So the question about what constitutes a breakthrough or an innovation, I think, is sort of an interesting one. The way that we tend to think about it is about leverage and multiplication of a given human effort. So when you electrify tools, now the force a person can exert or the number of times they can carry out an action go up greatly if it's motorized or powered in some way. Or with the invention of a car, a person can travel a much greater distance in the same amount of time. And so the questions that we look at in the pharma side of things are very similar. So there's a very interesting trend in pharma writ broadly, which is many advanced industries like aerospace or chip design or industrial design or architecture over the last several decades have seen rising research productivity, which means that an engineer today can do what 50 aerospace engineers could do maybe 50 years ago, right? But actually, there's been one industry that has not seen that trend, generally speaking, and that has been the development of new medicines, where actually there's more people today working on that type of research than ever before, but they face incredible challenges and incredible timelines and huge budgets. It's incredibly hard to do. I saw a study once that asked of people who go and get a PhD in medicinal chemistry, what proportion in the course of their whole career will ever contribute to a program that will become a drug, right? Just the chance in your whole career that you did it if you got a PhD in that area. And it turned out it was about 1 in 10, which means that the majority of the people that went to school for so long and did that work and contributed to program after program after program, only a tiny proportion of them ever had something come to light that actually was given to a person therapeutically on the market. And so what we focus on is turning that tide. And so in essence, we would like a greater proportion of people with that level of education, with all of the resources that as a species we're throwing at them, to take them that much further down the road in the form of that car, or take them much further down their research in the form of the force that they can exert on the question that they're interested in. So from that perspective, we think of what we do as innovative, but insofar as it empowers people who are trying to accomplish research.
Yeah, just following up from both Alex and Todd's question or answers there. So in terms of the innovation side of things, it is the massive potential costs and time reductions we're seeing in the drug discovery pipeline at the moment. So in our company itself, there's a long history of people working within the industry, and they are seeing a 10-fold reduction in the point of actually going mining data and going through to companies to validate hypotheses on this side. It is, it's happening now, this kind of increase in time. But it is true, the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry hasn't seen this in the last 50 years, this speed up, which other companies, other industries have seen. And I think we're beginning to see this benefit now. And AI, these technologies, machine learning is driving a lot of this. And it's getting data, information into the hands of the researchers as quickly as possible is the main driving force there. And so the follow-up from Todd's point around data access, this is underlying all of what we're doing at the moment is data and getting access to it. And the topic there of a friend who unfortunately passed, I think you said, but making data available, patients, getting this data into the hands of people that can actually do some real good with it is something we'd like to change. There's tight regulations around this at the moment, and talking to I guess the governments, the various trusts. We talk a lot to charities that have similar sort of data access issues. They want to be able to help their patients, but it's often tied up in strict regulatory domains. How we can think of innovative ways to access this and process and gain insights from this is a real thing for the future. But this is where I see things going.
And by the way, there's a reason that computation and simulation are so much harder in biology than other areas. It's not that we haven't been looking at it. So if you go back some of the papers that people like Mark and I would be familiar with, people were looking at these problems simultaneously to how can we simulate structures and fluid dynamics back in the 50s and 60s. So the problem has been looked at for just as long. The difference is that biology is far more complex. So for example, when we look at new potential medicines, the space of new chemicals that you can create is it absolutely dwarfs the combinatorial space, for example, of an aircraft fuselage. It numbers in the billions or trillions. And also the other critical difference is that biology was not designed to be human interpretable. So if you're designing an aircraft, we're starting by making shapes that make sense to us and we're reasoning to better versions. But with biology, we're starting things that weren't designed to be comprehensible and trying first to make sense of them, then reason our way towards something new.
Well, Alex, up until 7 months ago, I was part of the 9 out of 10 researchers that contributed nothing to a pharmaceutical. So I completely sympathize with what you just said. And to respond to Mark's point, I absolutely agree that open access to sequencing data, as I was benefiting from it so much in my postdoc and graduate school years, is absolutely essential to the advancement of science and to develop new pharmaceuticals. But where it becomes a problem, I think, is when, imagine a world where your parent or sibling had their genome sequenced and it became publicly available with your personal information attached to it. And because of that, you're denied a job application or you're unable to run for office. I think that in making the data accessible, there are really important issues to solve. Part of that being making the data completely anonymous and not being able to link it to your person.
I think you're exactly right. And another big problem is, as much as some of us are proponents of using AI to make these critical and very complex choices, there can also be a tendency to overcompensate, and it's to put too much faith in those systems. So, slightly orthogonal topic, but for instance, some have looked at, in the political realm, they've looked at, can we use computers to predict who will commit crimes, or how long a person should spend in jail if they're convicted of a crime. The problem is oftentimes we see that unless you're very careful, predictive systems can recapitulate biases that already exist in the input data. And so we can use these tools very powerfully, but we can also use them to just further mislead ourselves if we're not very careful. So I think you're quite right about sometimes the dark side of these. It's not, technologies themselves I don't think are moral positively or negatively.
But it can be little bit separated, Like, for example, the personal data, the name and the surname and the details of the person exactly. It can be in a very high secured storage. But the information about any kind of his improvements or the results of taking any therapy can be open for the medical doctors just to share the new methods. So in this case, we are setting up the platform where the patients should prove that he is ready to share his personal data or not. And normally they get just the nicknames because we don't need exactly his first and the second name. So they use the nicknames and they prove every time by SMS or any kind of methods. Just okay, I'd like to share my improvements to the different doctor, just because I want to continue the therapy with a different doctor or in different hospital. And in this case, we provide the whole history of his treatment to any doctor he chooses on the next step. And that's really cool. It really works. And it means that the doctor can be saved and the patient also.
I think there are solutions to some of these problems, and a lot of it actually just comes down to consent. The most famous cancer cell line, HeLa cells, were actually developed without the patient's consent, which poses an ethical problem. But because lots of cancer research is built on top of that. But there are an example of an organization that's working towards this positively is a nonprofit I'm an advisor to called Pattern.org, where they are finding patients with rare cancers, getting consent from them, and then developing cell lines around those. And the reasons that an individual patient may contribute to that is they're going through a really horrible experience with that disease, and they get some relief thinking that their contributions to medicine may help prevent other people in the future having to go through this experience. And so I think that the solution isn't a technological one. The solution to these issues is actually multi-scale. It's looking at it from sort of a politics and policy level, looking at it from sort of patient consent and social levels. And then on some level, technologically, as technologists, we have to be mindful of those in our implementations of the technology.
And just to clarify, in storing information in DNA, I meant to emphasize the security of it, not the fact that we want to restrict access to the people that deserve access to it, like scientists and companies like yours.
Good.
Yeah,
Did you wanna-
yeah, it's a continuation on the data side of things. Also a call out to, I guess, the large pharmas as well, large pharmaceuticals having access to large data sets which are potentially high value, which may not be being used actively at the moment. And having discussions around this and getting access in a shared and open way would be something I'd really champion and push forward for. So.
Very good. I'll bear that in mind. Maybe we're switching a little bit in the last few minutes. When you want to move from breakthrough to transforming an industry, actually, who do you hire or who works with you? Or how do you get the talent you need in order to achieve what you want to do? I know it's a bit of a switch, but I was just thinking, all of you have very ambitious plans, and you can't do it by yourselves. How do you find the right talents with the right qualifications and background and actually intent or purpose to fulfill what you want to do?
So, I mean, it's a massive challenge at the moment. In the last 2 years, what we knew 2 years ago has evolved completely. The algorithms, the methodologies have essentially obsolete from what we were looking at a while ago. And getting a workforce that is up to date to this is a big ask. So from our case, we work quite closely with a lot of the universities around, trying to essentially tap into a lot of the talent which is there, and work on internships to allow them to sort of come to Benevolent AI, work with us over the summertime essentially, and develop a workforce in this way. So it is a massive challenge. It's reaching out, and other companies obviously within people like DeepMind as well, setting up PhDs around this, around deep learning and how we can use this technology. So it really is making it clear that this technology is going to be making big changes going forward, ensuring that the supply is there for the demand, because it is a tough challenge. We're not just facing competition amongst the healthcare service, it's amongst all industries that this is being used, and that is the biggest issue for us.
So to the question of how you hire when you're doing something that maybe hasn't been done before, I would say that one of our views on it is about intersectionality, which is a lot of new fields come from cross-pollination between two or more existing fields. And eventually that thing strikes out on its own, gets its own name. But to begin with, it's a branch of something else, right? And so taking neural networks as an example, on one hand, neural networks were developed primarily by people that are called computer scientists. On the other hand, it was developed in the course of, among other things, understanding neuroscientific questions. In fact, a lot of the initial work done was to understand, for example, how the brain deals with mental illness, to create models of that. And some of those models then get appropriated for machine learning. So in our case, what we look for are things like a chemist that is very curious about computer science, or a biologist that can work with a medicinal chemist, that can then work with a virologist, that can then work with back to computer scientists. Of course, there's legal dimensions as well to all of this. And so we try to look for people that are great in the area that they're coming from, and it may be an established area, but have an intense curiosity about other areas, and then can have the discussions which will generate the collaborative idea which requires both sets of knowledge.
Any comments on this side?
So, as we are a startup, we could not, pay the big salary to their great experts. So in this case, we had to offer them just the interesting field to research, and just to offer them their equipment for this and our team to support. And it was our way how we developed the medical environment, because there are, between the medical doctors, there are people who are investigators in Seoul, and they are interested in new solutions. So, and we just had different kind of PR activities just to share the information about what we are doing and what goals we are dreaming about to reach. So, and we got a lot of requests from the medical doctors and from different engineers or any kind of people that we needed, that they'd like to join the project, and we collaborate with them. So with all of them, we got the way how to collaborate without the special investments for this kind of project. So, because, to get the investments to the company who has the very high tech and medical combination, so it's a challenge, really. That's why. That's why we were really happy to work with everyone who offered their interest to us. So that was our way.
That's a good way to build up. So in the last couple of minutes, maybe I can just go through each of the panelists. Unless anyone's got any burning questions from the floor? No? Yes? No burning questions. So maybe each of the panelists could just talk a little bit about what you hope to achieve as your next milestone in sort of what time frame. I think Hyunjun, you in your articles about you have a particular number you're trying to hit in terms of storage. I read somewhere. So maybe we just go, whoever just talk about your next milestone and when do you think you're going to hit it?
Sure. Our milestones are set at the capacity that we can encode per day. Right now, we're at megabyte levels because we just got started. But we hope to achieve terabytes per day with the seed funding that we're raising right now. We're in the cusp of closing. And with the next round of funding, so in 2 or 3 years after that, get to a petabyte per day. And with that, we'll take it to 3Scan. We'll partner up and store all of your data for you. That would be our major goal.
Sounds good.
Well, I'll go next. Our next milestone is to finish building our new laboratory, which will have 12 machines and will do about a petabyte of imagery a day, which is more imaging than all the pathology labs in Germany, for instance.
You told me yesterday something about having all the photographs taken in 2015 put into for a whole year, right?
Yeah, so as a size comparison, a petabyte per day is roughly equivalent to all the photographs that were taken by, in the year 2015.
That's unbelievable. That's really cool. So we have a bug tracker at the company. Bug number 1 is we haven't saved anyone's lives yet, personally. We have, as I mentioned, 27 programs. Furthest along is in multiple sclerosis. We've saved some mice. But for us, the highest aspiration to what we do is very, very simple, which is we hope that many of these programs will produce compounds that soon in the future find their way to patients and that do something meaningful for their health. And in the best case scenario, allow somebody to live that might not otherwise.
Mark?
And for us, essentially, it's the upcoming clinical trial results will be, the next big tester of our platform, our system. So that's what we're looking forward to. But for me personally, it's probably chatting with Todd straight after this about some of the data that he's got. And but yeah, so.
Excellent. Ekaterina, last word to you.
So, and we believe that in the next some months we start our 3 stages rehabilitation process, in not only in Europe, Russia, and in the Asia, but it will be a new way. It's a new trend in rehabilitation. So there will be a new profession like the rehabilitologists who will work with the people even with their multiple sclerosis or with their cerebral palsy. It doesn't matter what kind of disease it is. It means that these kind of doctors, they know how to build up the process, and that the process should be continued process, because now it doesn't work like this. So it's a new trend in rehabilitation.
Thank you very much. And please join me to thank these wonderful panelists for this great discussion. Ekaterina, Hyunjun, Mark, Todd, and Alexander. Thanks very much.